In this video, I go over the 5 things I always check before I start my set in Serato DJ. Find out what those are coming up. Thank you for watching PDot TV, where you'll find tips, tricks, and tutorials for DJs and music performers. Now let's get into the video. So right before I hop on and start my set, I'll open up my laptop, start Serato DJ, and I have my own little ritual of things I go through to make sure I check before I actually start playing. So here are my 5 things to make sure you check whenever you open Serato DJ before you start your set. First one would be to clear your history. So there's 2 ways to do this. The first would be to go ahead and click right here and open the history panel. And you can go ahead and click on this button right here to reset the history. But another way I like to do it as well is go into setup, go ahead into the library, and then right here you'll have this checkbox right here that'll say reset played tracks on exit. What this does is that every time you shut down Serato DJ, it'll go ahead and reset your played tracks. So whenever you open it, you don't have to go ahead and click on that reset for the history. Sometimes if you're opening Serato DJ like back to back real quick, say like something happened and you had to shut it down and you had to restart Serato DJ, once in a while, some of the tracks that you might have played or you opened up won't clear. So I always just by habit from playing on Scratch Live, it's just a habit for me to open the history and hit reset anyway. But it's also nice that if you forget to do that or you just don't have the time to go into the panel and do all that stuff, if you hit that checkbox in the setup screen, it'll take care of it for you probably 98% of the time. So that's the first one. Now, you're wondering why is resetting the history so important? So what the history does is that when you load songs in Serato DJ and you play them, they'll actually change color. So for instance, if I played this song right now and let it play through, it would turn from gray to blue. So what's nice about this is that it gives me a visual representation of what songs I've already played in my set. So this might not mean much to you if you're only playing for like maybe an hour and a half, but if you're doing an event or doing a set that's like 2 hours, 3, maybe even 5 or 6 hours for like a corporate gig, you might not want to, play the same song twice, or you just want to keep track of what you've played already. It gives you like a nice visual representation because you get to see what's still available to play that hasn't been played yet and what tracks to avoid if you're avoiding playing the same songs over again. So that's a nice feature to have, and I'm the kind of DJ that doesn't like repeating tracks if at all possible. So I like having that visual representation of the color change from blue to gray. You can also change it back to something more similar to how it was in Serato Scratch Live in the setup as well, so you might want to check that out. Now the second thing that I always check when I'm opening Serato DJ is that after I go ahead and open the history tab and hit reset, the next thing I do is go ahead and click right here to change to the prepare. Now the prepare panel is super important for the way I DJ. It kind of brings you back to how it was in the vinyl days where you would have your crate out and you might pull out a couple records that might work back to back, or you know that you have like a small set of like maybe 3 or 4 records that work well together. You'd start pulling those records and getting them ready right away because you wouldn't have as much time in the vinyl days. So think of the prepare crate like that, where you can go ahead and click and drag songs in, or you can go ahead and click either on Mac Command P or Control P on the PC to go ahead and add songs in as well. So what this does is just gives you a nice place to just go ahead and store tracks that you might play next or you're thinking of playing next. And what's nice about it is once you load them, they disappear out of that prepare panel. So you don't have to worry about, oh, what songs that I put into the prepare that I didn't use yet. And it just gives you a nice way to have options. This is the way I like to think about it. Because the way I use the prepare the most is that I'll play one song and then I'll throw maybe 2 or 3 songs in prepare just that kind of have a similar vibe and might go in different directions, so I can kind of feel out the crowd. If one song I load doesn't work, I know I have this one locked in, ready to go up next that I can just fire away and quick mix in and out if it's not working, or if it is working, have that next track that's in there in the prepare as well that I know that I'll follow this one up and just keep the energy of the crowd and keep the energy of the room building even more. Now after I open my prepare, the next thing I do in Serato DJ is go up here to the top left and then open these panels right here. So I have my effects panel open most of the time, and me personally, I have the break echo on for both decks. I'll go ahead and switch it to fade right here by clicking these two buttons, and this actually makes it into a echo out instead. So even though this says break echo, if you change the mode to fade, it turns into a nicer sounding echo out, in my opinion, than the actual echo out effect in Serato DJ. So I have that open, and then next I have the sampler open. So notice the sampler isn't full size. This is a nice feature they added in Serato DJ where you get this minimized view, because usually this is your normal view of your Serato sampler, or it used to be called the SP6, and it just took up so much room. So a lot of DJs that had their effects panel open wouldn't like having the sampler open, because look, it just takes up so much room on the screen. But in a recent update, Serato actually had this secondary view where it minimizes it. You can still see what your samples are, but it minimizes it, and you still get some of the nice controls, like what what bank you're in, a quick mute, as well as the overall volume of your sampler as well. So you still get a nice overview, and you can still see what you're doing in the sampler without having to take up all that screen real estate. Now the next thing I like to do is go back into the setup and actually go to the MIDI tab right here, and notice I have my X1 MIDI preset loaded. It's because I usually DJ with the Tractor Control X1, and I have a MIDI map to Serato DJ. I've done a previous video on that, to have all my cue points, loops, effects, and everything, and beat jumps ready to go on that. But where this comes into conflict is that if you're DJing with a mixer such as the Rain 62 or the Pioneer S9, where it has MIDI control and MIDI capabilities on the mixer, your MIDI mappings can actually cause some trouble. And I've ran into this in the past where I've MIDI mapped something and had the preset loaded, and even though I don't have the actual MIDI device plugged in, because certain controls are mapped, the mapping on the mixer will be screwed up. So like, say I pull down a fader, like a volume fader on like channel 1, but it might be mapped to something else into my X1 mapping. It might load a track, or turn on an effect, or turn the wet dry on. Some crazy stuff can happen depending on how you have your MIDI mapping set up. So what I always like to do is you can go ahead and restore defaults, which will just totally blank out all the MIDI mappings and just clear out everything. Or what I also like to have, just in case, is that once I have the restore defaults, all set up and everything's clear, make a blank MIDI mapping where nothing is mapped at all, and you can load it just for that extra reassurance that you're not going to have any conflicting controls mapped. That if you had your external MIDI device plugged in for Serato DJ and you're plugging into a mixer like the 62 or the S9, you don't mess up those controls and you don't run into any issues. So always make sure, if you use external MIDI devices like myself, always make sure to restore defaults or load your blank MIDI mapping. Now the final thing that I like to do while I'm here in the setup is I'll go ahead and switch over to the audio, make sure that my buffer size is set correctly. I like 5 milliseconds, gives a nice responsive control. What's funny is that Serato DJ actually defaults to, I believe, 10, so moving it back to 5 actually gives you like a nice tighter control. So just make sure that your laptop can handle whatever buffer size is possible that gives you the best control. And for my case, it's 5 milliseconds. It's what I recommend. So if you haven't done that already, definitely switch it down to 5. And while you're here, also check the calibration on your decks. Make sure that the circles on each are nice and crisp and as like circular as possible. So what happens in a lot of clubs, if you're using turntables, it doesn't happen as often in CDJs, and you really can't adjust it as much with CDJs, is that maybe the circle won't be circular, it'll kind of be ovalish, or it might be a little crispy, and it might like have little jagged lines in it, like it's not getting like the clearest signal possible. You might want to check your cartridges, check your needles, check the connection in the tone arm, make sure it's clean, make sure you're good to go. And then to kind of use these two controls right here, the left right balance and the PA balance right here, to make the circle as circular as possible and change it from whatever ovalish shape it might be, and make it just as perfect of a round circle as possible. Most of the time you're not going to be able to get this done, but the closer you get it to a full like nice circular circle, the better the better your tracking will be in Serato DJ. So always make sure you set yourself up for success as much as possible, and make sure both decks are calibrated as best as possible before you start your set. I mean, the calibration decks are open no matter what panel you're in, so you can, as soon as you hit setup, you can always see it. So I always try to check it as quickly as possible. I mean, I've ran into issues in the past when I haven't done this, and I always kick myself, and it only takes a few seconds. So once you get into the setup, always check your deck calibration. So that's a look at 5 things I always check before I start my set in Serato DJ. So question of the day, do you guys have a routine before you start your sets? Do you do anything in particular in any specific order? Go ahead and leave that down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And as always, if you found this video useful, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, go ahead and click right there to subscribe to this channel. Or if you'd like to watch more content, go ahead and click on that video right there. And thank you for watching PDot TV, where you'll find tips, tricks, and tutorials for DJs and music performers. See you next time.